Welcome to a Legendarium special about the strange world of Victorian death and funerals. In this episode, we will talk about the many strange superstitions surrounding death in Victorian Britain. Benjamin Franklin said, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." Coping with loss and remembering the dead is a human activity that dates back to our earliest days. Yet the Victorians had some of the most unusual and elaborate customs for remembering the dead in recorded history. This strangeness starts with how people died. Many Victorians died from familiar causes like heart attacks, strokes, and accidents. Yet a woman named Jane Goodwin, 22 years old, died while sitting in church because of her corset being too tight. Edwin Clayton, an old man who wore dentures made from teeth taken from the recently dead, accidentally swallowed his false teeth in 1904. They wedged behind the clack of his throat, causing vomiting that Clayton could not spit up, and he choked to death on his own throw-up. During December 1873, a boy named Mullins was eaten by a pig which dragged him out of his parents' house. Other ways to die in the Victorian era included scarlet fever, cholera, and being immolated when clothes made with highly flammable material touched one of the many open flames in the Victorian household. After death, families would collect any reminder of the deceased that could be had. These items included lockets, brooches, books, rings, and even locks of hair. They artfully arranged their loved one's hair in shadow boxes, wreaths, fabrics, corsages, and in jewelry. As the years went on, people braided and weaved the hair into intricate designs on brooches, earrings, and necklaces. At the dawn of photography, people even photographed the recently dead in pictures known as Memento Mori. With the invention of the daguerreotype in 1839, some began to take family photos. Because of the cost, most only took photographs at big life events, such as the death of a loved one. The photographer either propped the deceased person's eyes open or painted pupils on the photo print to make them look as if they remained alive. Spiritualists came to believe they saw the spirits of the dead in such photos. In the sad case of a deceased infant, the family would often keep the dead body until it mummified, then dress the baby's body and display it. If a child had been stillborn, miscarried, or lost, a wax effigy could be buried in place of the actual body. A host of superstitions surrounded death and funerals as well. Victorians carried the deceased out of the house feet first so they couldn't look back and call someone else to follow them into the next world. To keep the soul from getting trapped in a looking glass, they closed all curtains and covered all mirrors. Stopping all clocks at the time of death stopped bad luck, and Victorians turned family photos face down to prevent a vengeful spirit from returning through the photographs. Victorian concern with good etiquette carried over into funerals as well. If the deceased died of something contagious, the newspaper death notice would simply say, "Funeral private." Everyone understood what that meant. If they did not die of something catching, families sent out formal invitations in white envelopes with a black border. Such an envelope meant that someone had died. If you were invited to a funeral, you would be expected to arrive no less than 1 hour ahead of time. Upon entering the funeral parlor or the house of the deceased, men removed their hats and loud talking or laughter would be strictly forbidden. When pallbearers brought the coffin to the graveyard, ladies had to walk in front and only men could serve as pallbearers. After the funeral, the family began a mourning period divided into deep mourning and half mourning. Widows mourned the longest for at least 2 years and had to wear black wool, fur, and sealskin the entire time. Women even wore black underwear. Parents who had lost a child mourned for 9.5 months, followed by 3 months of half mourning. During deep mourning, families could have no social engagements other than going to church. While women had to wear heavy gloves, gowns, and veils, men simply wore dark suits with black gloves and cravats. At a time before sanitary laws, most funerals took place at cemeteries in the middle of towns. Over time, the churchyards became so packed with dead bodies that surrounding neighborhoods became dangerously unhealthy. Mourners even had to bury the dead in shallow pits beneath the floorboards of chapels and schools. Additionally, the simple graves of the Georgian era gave way to monumental Victorian death architecture. While some markers remained simple, others could be as big as a private mausoleum, including urns, wreaths, columns, or carved figures. Curiously, in Victorian Paris, one could find several nightclubs that celebrated death. In the Paris neighborhood of Montmartre, one could ponder their mortality in the well-named Cabaret du Néant, or the Cabaret of Nothingness. At this Gothic night spot, monks and funeral attendees served guests drinks named after deadly diseases, and they drank them on top of coffins and caskets. At Cabaret de l'Enfer, or the Cabaret of the Inferno, patrons would be greeted by a chorus of voices shouting, "Enter and be damned, for the evil one awaits you." At this satanically themed nightclub, half a dozen devil musicians, both male and female, would be suspended in a cauldron over a fire. They played selections from Faust as red imps stood with hot irons ready to prod those musicians who dared to miss a beat. Of course, what would hell be without heaven? Next to the Cabaret of the Inferno stood the Cabaret du Ciel, or the Cabaret of the Sky. At this heavenly-themed bar, Dante and Father Time greeted the patrons. They would then be served drinks by attractive ladies dressed as angels and entertained by Saint Peter himself. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.